teachings of Rabbi Ephraim Sprecher, Dean of Students at Diaspora Yeshiva on Mount Zion, Jerusalem.
Parshat Teitzei has 74 mitzvot. 74 is Gematria, Ayin Daled. The kingfish of all the parshas of mitzvot. Torah begins, Parshat Teitzei. You go to war against your enemy, and you see a beautiful captive woman. This parsha is always read in the month of Elul. You go to war against your enemy, says the Ari. The enemy, I've seen the enemy, and he is us. It's the Teitzei Hara, who appears sometimes as a beautiful woman. So our goal is not to be deceived and held captive by the Teitzei Hara. The month of Elul, you have to get rid of all of the Taibis. Take back your soul from the Teitzei Hara. So that's the first mitzvah Torah begins with, the captive woman. Even though we don't have that today, the Jewish soldier, all of us are soldiers in God's army, fighting the Teitzei Hara, especially in the month of Elul. Then the Torah goes on and speaks about a ben soreh morer, a rebellious and stubborn son, doesn't listen to the voice of his father or mother. Very strange that he is judged al shem sofo. Ben soreh morer is put to death. The parents bring him to the court. What did he do so terrible? So Talmud says he's killed now al shem sofo. In the end, he is a gluttonous, stubborn, rebellious son. And if we don't put him out of his misery now, later on he'll become a mugger and murder people. So therefore, we have to take him out before he reaches that stage, which is very strange that the Torah judges him what's going to happen in the end. Even though now he's not guilty of a capital crime, he's just a thief, and he's rebellious, and he's a glutton, meat and wine. But the Torah says at the end, this guy is going to wind up as a murderer, as a highwayman, once he eats up all the assets of his parents. And therefore, he is put to death al shem sofo, which is very strange. And therefore, the Talmud says that this law was actually never carried out. It's only to teach a lesson that a person has to be very careful not to reach a stage where there's a point of no return. And then the Torah gives the mitzvah of returning a lost object. Returning a lost object, Rapam Zatzal would say, to return a person his lost soul, his lost heritage. That is also a great mitzvah, to give someone back his heritage, to make a person a Baal Tshuva. You're also doing the mitzvah of returning a lost object, returning his lost soul, his lost Jewish heritage, or making him a Baal Tshuva. Then the Torah goes on and speaks about the Kan Sipor. You happen to see an ownerless bird hovering over a chicks. There's a mitzvah to send away the mama bird and to take the chicks. So this idea, it's a Kabbalistic idea, according to Ari HaKadosh, says that the mother hovering over the chicks is the Kaviyachol, the Shechina HaKdosha, God's divine presence, hovering over her children, the Jewish people, especially in the month of Elul. So a person has to be very careful to do the mitzvah of Shuach HaKan. He happens upon a nest with the chicks and the mother bird. And this is one of the mitzvahs the Torah promises long life. Right after that, the Torah gives the mitzvah of making a fence around your roof. What's the connection between sending away the mother bird and putting a fence on your roof of your home so no one should fall off? The person is destined to fall. It's written on Rosh Hashanah, but not off of my roof. I will make sure that I will do the mitzvah and protect society from harm. Then the Torah tells us about that Ammon and Moab may not come into the congregation of Israel because they didn't greet us with bread and water, and because they also hired Bilam ben Baor to curse us, Bilam, to curse the Jewish people and annihilate us. So what does the Torah have to give two reasons for? Ammon and Moab are shut out from the Jewish people, the males, not the females, because they didn't greet us with bread and water, and they hired Bilam. So isn't the second reason enough? They hired Bilam to curse us, to annihilate us. So what do you have to say? Because you didn't greet us with bread and water. So the answer is, a person doesn't become a mass murderer overnight. It starts off with little increments. Ammon and Moab owed us a lot because Avram was so kind to Lot and saved Lot. Otherwise, he couldn't give birth to Ammon and Moab. Two nations come out from Lot because Avram saved them. So the least they owe us. So they couldn't greet us with bread and water when we left Egypt. Small favor. Person has a bad character trait, and it's not checked, it can lead to the worst consequences. Person has to be very careful to make sure that his midos are tovos. He has good manners. He's polite and he's kind. He's not an ingrate. Ammon and Moab were ingrates. They come from Lot. Lot was saved by Abraham. So the least they could do is when we crossed their path, when we left Egypt, to greet us with bread and water. And because they didn't do that, they eventually hired Bilam to exterminate us. So therefore, midos tovos are derech eretz kadma laTorah. Derech eretz kadma laTorah. The Torah goes on and speaks about paying a worker on time, not to hold back his wages. And then the Torah goes on and tells us, remember what Hashem did to Miriam on the road when you left Egypt. Miriam spoke Lashon Hara against her brother. She became a leper. So it says, remember what Hashem did to Miriam on the road when you left Egypt. So Rashi says, if you don't want to get struck with leprosy like Miriam, do not speak Lashon Hara. Anyone who speaks Lashon Hara transgresses the positive mitzvah. He didn't remember what Hashem did to Miriam, because if he did remember, then he would not speak Lashon Hara and wind up as leper as Miriam was. The question is, Moshe Rabbeinu also was struck with leprosy back in the book of Exodus in the beginning when he spoke against the Jewish people. They won't believe. God turned his hand leprous. So why not remember by the burning bush? Moshe's hands became leprous when he spoke against the Jewish people. They're not believers. God says they will believe. So Moshe was struck first by the snare, by the burning bush. So why not remember that? Moshe spoke Lashon Hara before Matan Torah. This was by the burning bush. Before Matan Torah. But Miriam, remember Miriam's sin, Miriam did tshuva. So why should we remember what Miriam did? Didn't she do tshuva? There was no, because the only way a person can become pure if a Kohen examines the leprosy and announces it pure. But Miriam had a problem, because the only Kohen at the time was her brother Aaron and his sons. There was no Kohen to see her, because her relative cannot examine, a Kohen relative cannot examine the leprosy. And the only Kohanim at the time were Miriam's brother and her nephews. And yet Miriam didn't give up hope. Remember, it's a positive sign for Miriam that even though the situation looked hopeless for her, she would never become pure, because there was no Kohen to pronounce her purity. She trusted that Hashem would come up with a way that she would become pure. And it happened that HaKadosh Baruch Hu Kaviyachol examined her and pronounced her pure. But we remember the sin of Miriam, not to put her down, even though she did tshuva, but Miriam didn't lose hope. She didn't lose the emunah, atikva, that God would find a solution for her and find a way to pronounce her pure, which he did. Then the Torah goes on and says, remember what Amalek did to you on the road when you left Egypt. The same language it says by Miriam, remember what Hashem did to Miriam. Says, remember what Amalek did to you when you left the road. You left Egypt on the way to Eretz Yisrael. So Amalek terrorized us. That's physical terror. But if someone speaks Lashon Hara, that's a spiritual terror as well. So the same language, the Torah says, remember what Hashem did to Miriam when she spoke Lashon Hara, and remember what Amalek did to you when you left Egypt. So the Torah compares Lashon Hara when Miriam spoke. Remember what Hashem did to Miriam, and remember what Amalek did to you when you left Egypt. So we're supposed to eradicate Amalek. Amalek is that symbol of the Yetzer Hara, physical Amalek, the spiritual Amalek, during this holy month of Elul. The Haftarah, Isaiah 54, God tells the prophet, even if I've abandoned you for one moment, only one moment, with great loving mercy I will gather you in. God never abandons us. He's always there. He says, Berega koton azavtich, if I would abandon you, only for one rega, but with great loving mercy I shall gather you in. So this is the Parshat Teitzei, a little bit of what Parsha is about, to take the fight to the enemy. The month of Elul, the enemy is what? The Yetzer Hara within us, who appears as a captive, beautiful woman, or in any other disguise, not to be fooled by the Yetzer Hara, to take the fight to the enemy. Only then can we win on the Yom Hadin, which is coming up. Thank you very much.
For more of Rabbi Sprecher's teachings, visit rabbisprecher.com.